Jay is a special friend of mine, actually. Not special in that way, but special in other ways. And Jay, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Jay, and I'll tell you a little story, and we're going to introduce Jay's keynote speech today. Jay grew up in New York City, and after getting the, quote, classic butch haircut of a flat top at the age of 13 in 1961, Jay was kicked out of her home and remained homeless until the year 2000. In 2002, Jay co-founded Queers for Economic Justice, a progressive nonprofit, and she was the shelter director there for 10 years. The building that Queers for Economic Justice is in also houses the Audre Lorde Project and Sylvia Rivera Law Project, and Fierce, which are all nonprofits working with various populations in New York and beyond. And they're currently about to rename the building the Miss Major J. Toole Building for Social and Economic Justice. It's very exciting. So currently Jay is building Jay's House, which is jaysHouseandResourceCenter.org, which is the first LGBTQ adult shelter in the US. I first met Jay in New York at a storytelling performance where she recounted the haircut story and what it was like to be butch in Greenwich Village in the 1960s, and how she navigated the many years on the street doing all sorts of things. And I imagine we might hear a few of those stories today. She has some really good ones. But what I remember most really is feeling suddenly connected to the times that she was recounting, because I could see myself reflected in those stories. This is one of the many reasons why I really love the word butch, because it connects me with people who came before me. And hearing Jay's stories, even though they're very different from my stories, and I have different kinds of privileges and difficulties through my life, I feel into the places where we're really similar and feel that history in a living way that I don't know how I'd experienced before. Honestly, I feel a lot less alone for that, and I feel connected and grateful for the privileges I've had the luxury of having because of all the work that she and many of you who came before me and after me have done. So I'm very excited to let all of you all hear a lot of Jay's wonderful stories in addition today, and I'm really honored to be introducing Jay Toole. You ready? You ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. Is it on? Hey guys. I'm Jay. And who are you? Can I name? Yeah. And pronouns? Okay. So I'm not your regular keynote speaker. I move around a lot. I don't usually do speeches. Well, I never do fucking speeches. And I curse a lot, sorry. And I try not to, but it just comes out. So I'm a storyteller. I love telling story of history. It's my history, but it's every other butcher's history also, you know, and every other queer person that had to go through difficulties of being queer, of being a lesbian, being a butch, being trans, whatever names that we're using for this day. So, stories, how I came out. I think I was 12, right? These butchers were much older than me. I had a little girlfriend, not that kind friend, and she brought me to her house, and they were railroad apartments back then, right? And so you had to walk through all of this long hallway, and there was bedrooms to the sides, and then a kitchen up in front. So she had like 100,000 fucking brothers, you know? And she was going, this is Billy, and this is Joe, and this is Frank, and this is Mike. And we're going past bedrooms, and she passed by, and this is Bob, right? And I walked by, and it was like, stopped, and took a step back. And I said, Bob? I'm not using the real names. And it didn't, I could tell that there was, I just knew it wasn't male identified, that this was a woman, this was a girl, and I went back to that house every day. I mean, every fucking day. And she was in traction. She had her legs up in the air. And she was a butch. And she had that, this is 1961, and she had like a Elvis Presley shit down her forehead, curly Q. And it was like, oh my God, And I just kept going back there until one day I walked past the room like I always did and looked in and smiled, and she went like that, And it was, it was that. But I knew right away, she made love to me, but I knew right away that I did not want to be on the bottom, and she's on traction. She jumped off a bridge or something and her legs were in traction. But I knew immediately that I did not want to be the girly part of this whole thing. And this, and so it stopped right away, right? So how I got to dress like this was that back then these butches said, what do you want to be? You want to be a butch? You want to be a femme? And that's just how they presented it. And I said, I want to be a butch. And they took me to buy clothes, and they got my hair cut, and it was a flat top, as Sinclair said. And I went home, and it was immediately, I was thrown out of the house. So I was 13, living on the streets, and went to the West Village. And that's where I lived for many, many years. I had my own park bench, and it was like today, there's a lot of queer homelessness, and it didn't change. And 52 fucking years, and it hasn't changed. Back then, it was a community also. Sylvia Rivera was back then. Marjorie was back then. Johnson. So many people who have since passed. I think I'm just about the only one left in New York City, except for Miss Major. If you don't know who Miss Major is, stop by the lobby tonight. I'm having dinner with her, and we're going to be sitting in the lobby. So anyway, being homeless in the village back then was, it was community, but it was scary, and it was, didn't know anybody. You're 13, you're sleeping in a park, and you're just afraid of everything. And I met some other queers that were homeless also, and we started hanging out together, In the meantime, I have a resume of all the things that I've done through my life, and I'll talk a little bit about those things, but I have been an armed robber. I've been in jail for that. I have been a pimp. I've been arrested for white slavery. I have multiple sexual deviancy cases. And my first time in California, I was 15 and was arrested for grand theft auto. So, I'm not the kind of butch that had jobs or anything like that. I was a street butch, and I did street culture. And I thought it was fine, Once I got to know everybody, it was good, You get arrested by the cops on 8th Street and 6th Avenue. The butchers would meet on a corner. That was our fucking corner. 8th Street, 6th Avenue, New York City, right? And the butchers would meet there, and we'd wait for our girls, right? And the cops would come by and arrest us for sexual deviancy, right? Which meant that we didn't have 3 articles of female clothing on, right? It was the law. It was the law back then. You had to have 3 articles of female clothing on, which I still today don't understand it. It was like, okay, I understood panties. I understood a bra. I did not know what the third piece was. You know, I had, and I still don't, you know. And the poor, you know, the guys, the drag queens were also arrested for, you know, female impersonation, sexual deviancy, for not having 3 articles of men's clothing on. And they had not a clue either what the 3 pieces were. So during my travels, I used to steal cars and bring them all across the country and everything, and how I got arrested for white slavery. And this is how I survived. This is how a butch survives in the 60s, in the 70s, that had, you know, there was no community centers, you know, there was no place to go. You know, alcohol was against the law. You could not be served if you were queer. Going to a bar, it was against the law to serve us. It was against the law for us to be 3 or 4 or 5 of us standing on the corner. We couldn't congregate back in the 60s. They said we had mental health problems, you know, and then in the early 70s, I woke up and I was cured, you know, because the DMZ-4 or 5 or something like that? They said, oh, there's nothing wrong with them. And I said, I didn't even take any medication and I'm fine. You know, I just woke up and I was cured. You know, it was pretty amazing. I'm in New York. I'm 16 or 17, and I stole a New York City taxi cab. I know, why? I don't know. And decided it was me, my girl, and this gay boy, and we decided that we wanted to come to California, you know. This was 1963, as a matter of fact. And so we were trying to work our way across country in a New York City fucking cab, you know. And on the top of the cab was still taxi, you know. And it wasn't yellow cabs. In the 1960s, there were no yellow cabs in New York City. They were two-tone. So the ones that we stole, blue and fuchsia. The doors. It was like, you know, seen us coming, you know. So, you know, we'd stop at churches, and they'd give you food coupons or gas coupons, and we'd plant trees. And whatever work that we could do to get through without doing too much crime. And we got to this place, this little bitty fucking town called Van Horn, Texas. Don't ever go. Anybody here from there? Good. Van Horn, Texas. I'm sleeping in the back seat with my girl. The guy gets up, walks into the sheriff's office, and asks for work, if there any work in the town. The sheriff comes out, and I open up my eyes, and there's this big guy, redneck, with a cowboy hat, you know, and calling us out. And they immediately arrested us for vagrancy. Even though we had a few $100s in our pockets, they arrested us for vagrancy. They popped the trunk of the car, and we never opened it. We never opened the trunk. We didn't care what was in there. But in the car was, and maybe some of you guys will know this movie, Mondo Cane. Mondo Cane is a cult film right now, today. It's the first, it was the first film showing women's breasts on a beach. So those photos were in the trunk, you know, because they used to put photos in front of movie houses back then. And they said that I was in these photos. That was me in the photos, you know. And it was like, yeah, right, you know. So, you know, I'm still a kid, and the girl I'm with is younger than me. And they ask her how old she is, and I think she was, I don't know, 15, 14. So right away, they hit me with what they call white slavery. Do you know what that means? Me neither. I didn't know what it meant either. I thought it was because I was white. I did. I had no idea. Who the fuck hears white slavery? You know? What it means, up north, it's called the Mann Act, right? Down south, it's called white slavery. And it is, if I can remember what it says in the thing, it's for the purpose of bringing a minor over the state lines for the purposes of prostitution, right? So they arrested me for bringing a minor over the state line for the purpose of prostitution, and that's what they hit me with. So they got me for vagrancy, white slavery. They did not get me for the car, right? So I did 18 months there in their little bitty fucking town where they brought all of the townspeople. You know, it's like in the old cowboy movies, you know, a little cinder block jailhouse cell, and the townspeople were coming by and looking, oh, you know, look at these deviants from New York City. And so we started singing, here come the deviants from New York City, doo-wop, doo-wop. You know, and they didn't appreciate that too much. They shipped the girl back to New York City, to the youth house, and they kept me for 18 months, and then they let me and the guy go and gave us the cab back. Amazing. I know. It sounds like, you know, you're making these stories up, but it's true. You know, they gave us the cab back. They gave us a little bit of money back. And like, again, in the old cowboy movies, get out of Dodge. You know, it was like, get out of Van Horn. So what did we do? Because, you know, for those 18 months, they gave us 3 small cans, one, you know, breakfast, lunch, and dinner of Vienna sausages, 3 slices of bread, a big thing of water, no cigarettes, but the sheriff's wife, well, it's nice. She'd come and give me a cigarette once in a while. So as soon as they opened up that cell door, man, we made it right to their diner, ordered food, sat down, and here comes these 3 guys in with their cowboy hats. What did we tell you? You know? And we got the food to go. We didn't stay there. We hightailed it out of there. And made it to California, and that's when I was arrested for grand theft auto here in California, and did a little bit of time here. And when they gave me what they call a floater. So a floater is, if you're from another state and you're arrested, a floater is, they pay your airfare or train fare or bus fare to get you the fuck out of their city with the guarantee that you will not come back for like 25 years. I think I'm good. Yeah. It's been a little over 50 years for me. Getting back to some other stories, being a pimp, I was, and I'm not going to use this person's name, you know, he's dead, but somebody that did the Campbell's soup can. I think we know who I'm talking about. So when early in the 60s, during the factory, he used to have these parties, you know, and being a street butch, one of his guys came up to me and said, you want to make some money? It's like, yeah, what do I got to do? And so I became this person's, say, personal pimp. You know, it was where I went and got young people to bring to his private parties that he would hold for his clients, and just got me into knowing more and more and more and more famous people. Today, back then I didn't know who the fuck they were. You know, today I see their names and it's like, that little scumbag, you know, that motherfucker. You know, it's like shit, you know. They have things. Anyway, I get it. I'll get angry if I start talking more about that shit. Anyway, those are parts of my life, and those are parts of a lot of the butchers that I knew in New York that were doing the same thing to make money. Like when I was in jail, when I'd get arrested, I'd be in a cell with other butchers, and we'd suits, hat, tie, you know, pimps, you know, of the day, you know. And so it was not uncommon back then, and it's still not uncommon today. I met this wonderful, wonderful madam down in New Orleans, right? We'll call her Kitty, you know. Right? She was one of the top madams down there on Bourbon Street, and she'd come up to New York maybe 4 times a year, 5 times a year, because she loved the fucking butchers in New York City, right? I mean, absolutely loved them. So she'd come up to New York, and she hired me. And don't laugh. She hired me, like, she'd have all these butchers in, she'd rent out these great spaces, and she'd have all these butchers in there for her to have love making, right? And if somebody didn't know how to do it right, I was hired to show young butchers how to please a woman. you know, it's like a fantasy job. It's like I wish I had that job now. Maybe not. I'm sorry, baby. Maybe not. But it was a pretty, it paid, in all ways. And when I talk about these instances, people say that I should still be doing it now. And I don't think so. I think the butchers of today know what the fuck they're doing. And I think they knew what they were doing back then. I think Kitty was just hyper, whatever. So, those were good times. God damn. They really, really were. When I was a young butch, not that I'm not young now, I'm still got it, right, babe? Butch on butch was like taboo, It was, you just couldn't. There was, if a butch walked into a bar with their partner that was a butch, no one was going to speak to you, No one was going to want to invite you to their house or go out with you or do anything, And it was the same thing. I think, what do you call them? Lipstick lesbians. Two femmes being together. No, it was beyond what people could think of, in a queer community. It was just butchers were for femmes, femmes were for butchers, right? And nothing crossed unless it was behind closed doors. And that's how I grew up. I'm a stone butch, right? 52 years, stone butch. And I fell in love with a fucking butch. It's like, that's her. Things change. People change. Attitudes change. Some things never change. Outside world, is still dangerous for us. It hasn't changed from when I was a kid being dangerous and being beat up for being queer to 4 years ago that I was gay bashed and beat up pretty bad. So things haven't changed that much when it comes to violence in our communities and the violence that is brought to us. Like we don't go out looking for it. It is brought to us, and I'm hoping that'll change before I leave this. I was going to say hotel. Yeah, I hope it changes before I leave this hotel. Duh. But I feel, also in, growing up, the word trans wasn't in there, You couldn't, the word just wasn't there. Were there trans people? Of course, and to see, like, I love my fucking community. I love every single one of yous. And when I see parts of our community that are not welcoming to another part of our community, that hurts. It not only hurts me, it hurts you, it hurts our movement, it hurts every little fraction Is that the right word? Fraction? Well, it just, we shouldn't be doing it, And I'm not here to, preach to anybody or anything. I'm just telling my stories, how I feel. But in this spaces for the last 2 days has been glorious to me. I mean, fucking glorious. I mean, I look out at your faces, as an elder, and I am proud. I am so proud. I'm proud of Joe, I'm proud of Wolf, I'm proud of all of yous, because you respect people, you respect who's in the room, you read the name tag. I see yous. You look at the name tag before you say something, which is outstanding, If there wasn't a name tag, would you ask, We should start doing that. Maybe just asking, what do you want to be called? Joe Blow, Franklin, he, she, to start asking these questions. I would have never asked those questions in my youth. I would have never, ever, ever asked these fucking questions. I wouldn't even be with a butch 12 years ago. Never even thought of a butch and butch 12 years ago. 12 years ago, I was still hooked on crack. I was still living on the streets. I was dying. And one queer came into my homeless shelter, put her hand out, and said, come have coffee with me. Let's talk. And it was like, holy shit. Being homeless and being queer is really rough, and especially in today. You see more and more queer kids out there. All my work is done with homeless queers. That's all I do. That's all I want to do. I've been out there for over 25 years. It's in my blood. It's who I am. I keep on having this dream, right? Maybe twice a year, 3 times a year, I have this dream that I go back to my old shelter, and there's a big fucking sign on it, and it says, closed, due to lack of homelessness. That's my dream, not just for queers, We okay? All right. Not just for queers, but for everybody. Everybody needs a fucking house. Everybody needs a home, something to eat. Coming in on the plane, thank you so much, Joe, for getting those seats. They were awesome. Coming in on the plane, I'm talking to the, what do you call those people? Stewardess, flight attendants, stewardesses. And I talked to her for a few minutes, and when the plane landed, she comes over to me, and she was hugging me through the whole flight. I know. And she comes, and she gives me a big bag, and she's whispering in my ear, don't tell anybody, it's completely against airlines policy, right? So we get to the hotel and we open it up, and it's all of this amazing food, and we've been outside giving it to the homeless, and that's all it takes, It's just one person, like I did, talking to one person, like I did. That's what you need to do, you need to do, you need to do. Keep your hand out there, We got to keep our hands out for the ones that aren't here. I'm speaking for the ones that are dead, the ones that'll never make it into these rooms, because no one put their hand out to them. I'm here for them. I'm speaking for them. It's one queer helped me. There's thousands of us. Can imagine what we can do, So when you walk past a homeless person, it doesn't matter, like I said, whether it's queer or you don't even know what their sexuality is or their pronouns or anything. You don't have to stop and talk to them, You don't have to give them change. All you have to do is walk by and say, hey, stay safe tonight. And keep on stepping. That's all it takes for them to hear somebody even verbally. I went a whole year without talking to anybody, without talking to a soul, until it got so bad. This poor woman, she's walking down Park Avenue in Manhattan, and she's walking towards me, and I felt like I had to say something, And I, talk to me! And the lady took off like a bat out of the opposite direction. She was gone. I think I scared her, you know. So I learned a lesson not to do that, to be, you know, a little bit more gentle, you know. But I'm sure, I'm sure a lot of other, you know, homeless folks feel like we don't have voices, you know. And I still say we because I still feel it. You know, I'm not that far removed from it. I don't have a job, you know. I tell my stories to make money, you know. And I'm looking for, try to start up Jay's house so that queer folks don't have to go through what I did. I did it already. I don't want anybody else to go through this shit, you know. I want to get something started for them. And I do what they call, we're calling queer monologues in New York. And I tell my stories, you know, and I'm trying to make the rent that way. What was I talking about? Oh, keeping your hand out. Right. Thank you. Your name? Sharon. Thank you, Sharon. So keeping your hand out is so, so, so important, right? If that one queer, her name is Anya Duggan. She's from Ireland. She's one of my best friends now. And I couldn't hardly understand a word she said because she had this thick fucking brogue, you know? It's like, I don't know what she's talking about. But she came into my shelter and she took me out. We went and had coffee and she said, you have to come to the LGBT Center and hear these people talk in New York, right? And I said, no, I'm not going to the LGBT Center because I used to sleep in front of there when they first opened and they kicked me to the curb, you know? I thought it was a safe place that I could go. You know, and I don't mind the center knowing this because I tell them to their faces, you know. You know, it's like, whatever. Because look at me now. You know, so she finally like grabbed me by the ear. And this was like 2 weeks after 9/11. And she dragged me to hear these people. It was the Queers for Economic Justice Network. And they were having a panel, so it was Amber Hollabaugh, Richard Kim of The Nation, Joseph C. Philippes, oh my God, Terry Bogus from Families, something. I'm old, so I can get away with that shit. Yeah. And anyway, it was a whole bunch of people. You know, famous people, I guess people would say. And they were talking about homelessness and drug addiction and welfare and all this shit, you know? And it was like, I thought they were talking about me. You know, they're talking my life. So homeless people have a tendency not to think that they have voices. And that's how I felt for 25 years. That I did not have any voice. That no, who wants to hear a homeless person talk? You know, you know, people aren't paying us for that. You know, nobody's coming knocking on my box. You know, say, hey Jay, come on out and talk tonight. You know, so I went and they handed the mic to the audience, and it ended up in my hand. You know, and I started talking. And I told them what they needed to fucking do. That they needed to go into the shelter system. That there's thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands. You have no fucking idea how many homeless in our community there are, really. And I couldn't fucking shut up. You know, I just couldn't. And I still haven't. You know, you know, which is, I guess, a good thing. You know? It's like, I don't want to be quiet, you know. I want people to know that queers don't have money all the time. You know, that there's some of us that are really struggling. There's some of us in drug addiction. I was. There's some of us in alcoholism. I was. There's some of us homeless. I was. You know, and probably maybe some of you in here have it in your past. Or maybe now. You know, we don't know. Until we start talking to each other, until we start having conversations. So I started going to meetings and did not understand a word they were talking about. You know, now remember, you know, I stopped going to school when I was 13 and I wasn't that smart then. That's not true, right? I'm very smart. That's why I keep her. So I didn't understand because they're all academics, you know? It's like I didn't understand a word they were talking about, but I'd hear welfare and homelessness and drug addiction and blah, 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 blah. You know? So after like a year and a half, I never said a word. Amber Halabar, Terry, and Ignacio Rivera pull me into a side room and say, "You don't talk. What's the matter with you?" I don't know what you're saying. You know, I have no idea. I used to go home at night, go into a dictionary, and try to find the words that they were using to figure out what the hell they were saying. You know, but it was my own shit that I couldn't say anything and ask them, "Can you lower down the language? Can you explain to me what a word means?" But I didn't have that courage then. You know, I do now. Now I fucking just tell you, "What?" I became the director of I told them that we needed to go into the shelter system, and they made me the director of the shelter program there. All right, so. Oh. I thought they were the most, you know, I was a great con artist. I could con anything out of anybody. You know, and I'm thinking, are they idiots? What is wrong with these people? You know? It's like I didn't understand. I said, just left my box. I just stopped smoking crack. You want to pay me thousands of dollars to open up and be a director of the shelter program. I have no education. I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. Yes, I'll take the job. You know? You know? And it worked out well, you know? And I still don't know what the fuck I'm doing. You know, I do what I think is best for my community, which is us. You know, I do what I feel in my heart. Do no harm. I've done enough harm in my life. You know, do no harm. Put your hand out. Keep it out. You know, hope somebody fucking grabs it. You know, like I grabbed Anya's hand. Every time I walk into a shelter or pass somebody in the streets, stop, say something, put my hand out, please. And in my head, I'm saying, please grab it. I'm not going to tell them that, you know, because we have to make that first step. You know, if you put your hand out, somebody has to grab it. You can't grab theirs, right? You can't make somebody not be a drug addict, not be an alcoholic, not be homeless, you know. They have to make some moves themselves, like I had to do, and it took a long time. What else in my life would I think would be interesting? I ran numbers, you know. Me and this other butch in the early 60s, you know, all the bars in the 60s were run by the mafia, right? Run by the mafia, so we worked for the mafia and ran numbers for them. And then, in our brilliancy of our pea brains, oh, 1, 2, 3, no. You know when you go to your favorite grocery store, bodega, supermarket, you play the 3 numbers or the 4 numbers or the 5 numbers, right? Well, this is the illegal backside of it. You go to your bodega, or the guy on the corner, or some apartment, and you give him the money and you tell him what numbers you want. And then whatever number comes out through the racetrack, if it's your number, then you get paid off and the feds don't know and you don't have to pay no taxes. You know, so it's an illegal gambling of playing numbers. So, and that's what we used to do, me and this other butch. And we got it into our brains this one day. Let's not give the money back to the Bonanno family. Now, this is the fucking Bonanno family, right? The biggest mafia in New York City, right? On the East Coast, really. So we go and we spent the money and we had a blast and everything, right? And we're in Washington Square Park and we see this guy heading towards us. You know, and we said, oh my God. We knew, you know, that it was one of their made men, which means they've killed somebody. So we knew he was a made man. And he's walking towards us, and we run like bats out of hell. We take off, right? And all we hear is boom, boom. We didn't get hit because they didn't want to kill us, but they wanted to scare the shit out of us, and they did. They did. That day we went back to that pizza, right? I can't say where it is or anything. Good to be back again. Because I think it's still there. But we went and got on our knees. I'm not kidding, guys. We got on our knees and told them, please don't kill us. Please don't kill us. We'll do anything you want, right? And he didn't kill us. Of course, I'm standing here. But, we continued running numbers and selling heroin. At the same time, there was no lesbian bars back then, right? Everything was undercover speakeasy bars, and the mafia owned that too. So this one guy, Jimmy, who was also in the mafia, he owned a lesbian bar called Club Bohemia, and he hired me there. I think I was 16, and he hired me as a bouncer. It was the best job ever. I just got these great fucking jobs all my life, It's like, who needs to be a CEO of Marriott? I had the best of all worlds, man. Women, and more women. So anyway, my job as a bouncer was, like in all the bars back then, it was really hush-hush, Like I said, we weren't allowed to dance together. We were not allowed to be served alcohol, right? And we weren't allowed to dress like this. So in this one bar that I worked, you'd walk in and look like a regular bar, and then there'd be a back door. And in the back door, it was like queer heaven, Everything was dark and there was nothing fancy. And there was a little stage that I would sit on top of, right? And there'd be a jukebox and a button, right? So when the cops would come in, which they came in all the time to arrest us, right? And so when the cops would come in, the bartender, Jimmy, would hit the button under the bar. The red light would go on in the back room, which made me aware that the cops were coming in. So I'd get off the stage, break everybody up, girl with boy, boy with girl, girl with, make sure there was no two same sex anywhere. Hide all the alcohol, just make, we were all straight. And you had to pray that you had ID on you, right? If you didn't have ID, you were definitely going to jail if you didn't have ID. If the cop didn't like the way you looked, you were going to jail, If you sneezed, you were going to jail. And in jail was, they used to call it the Playhouse, right? It was on 8th Street and 6th Avenue in Greenwich Village, women's prison, right in the heart of the village. I was there when they brought Angela Davis there. They put her on my floor. It was like, whoa, man, the woman was beautiful, and she still fucking is. I gotta say, but, the protests and everything that was going on during that time was awesome. The only thing that we didn't like, her being on our floor, was that she was put in like a nursing room. And of course, the FBI was coming in and out, and all of these officials were coming in and out. And every time they'd have to bring her out, we'd have to go on lockdown, So I give it up for Angela, man, that she fought to be put in general population. Another note. Okay. So I just give it up to her. I seen her a few years ago, and I yelled down to her, House of D, which was the women's house of detention. But everybody called it the House of D. And she stopped her speech. She looked up and she was, another one. And we had a little talk, and I told her she was on my floor when they first brought her in that night. And she stayed on that floor until they brought her out and took her back to California. Oh, here. forgot I was in California. Let's see. The house, I told you what the House of D was. So just a trigger warning. I'll tell you a little bit what it was like to be in prison, right? And being a butch. Or being a woman-identified person that they did not like, right? Okay. So they bring you in on the paddy wagon, right? That's not what you call them now. The vans, right? And they take us out in shackles, hands, feet, bring you into the first floor of this prison. And they'd strip you down, everything off, you know, and there'd be male and female guards there, and put you in showers, right? And delouse you, right? Which made no sense to me because they gave you back your own clothes. Which made, and they do that, and they did that in the shelter system too, and it made no sense to me, but, and then it was time for the physical examinations. These were the most, they would put syringes up inside of us, in our vaginas, saying that they were testing for STDs and for tuberculosis. They'd cram their hands into us in every hole, saying that they were looking for drugs. I always thought it was a form of torture to us, that not that they were looking for something, you know, that it was actually a form of torture. A woman wrote a book, I can't think of her name right now, about, she was arrested also around this time, and she wrote a book and sued the city about what happened to her. So many women have come out scarred for this, you know, for the rest of their lives, including me. You know, I can see myself, as I tell this particular story, I see myself on that fucking gurney, you know, and this doctor yelling at me, "I'm finished, get off the table." And I couldn't move. I mean, the pain was, you just couldn't move. Your legs were numb, you know, and they're trying to hurry you out because they want to get the next one in. And it was something that every butch that I knew went through that every time we were arrested. And we were arrested almost every fucking weekend for sexual deviancy. You know, hopefully they don't do that anymore, you know, because I haven't been arrested, so I don't know. Yay. So, just, you know, I don't know where I was going with this, guys. Just a little bit of history. What butch-identified women and women that didn't meet the terms of the prison industrial complex, the way we should look or the way we should act, the physical examinations that they would do on us. On the other hand, being a butch in prison, not too bad. Not too bad, you know. It's like once you got over that and you're rested, you know, like I was always hooked on heroin. So I would go in and tell them to put me on lockdown, which is confinement, right, for a couple of days. There was no methadone or anything back then. And I'd have to kick cold turkey. But then when you'd get back out into population, you wouldn't have to worry about, butchers didn't have to worry about nothing. And that's why they called it the Playhouse of New York. The commissary was taken care of by the ladies. Your clothes were taken care of. Your bed was taken care of. Your food was taken care of. Made sure that everything was okay. And it was like a playhouse at times. You know, you forget that you're outside, you know, that life of heroin and drug addiction, you know, and you're resting and you got women around you, and, you know, so it's all right, and you forget about the pain. When I was, one of the times, and I don't think I tell this story that much, one of the times I was in jail kicking heroin, I had a really bad habit, and I was in so much pain before methadone, I got it again. I have such a pea brain sometimes. I got it in my head that if I tell them to pull all my teeth, they will give me something. And that's what I did. You know, this isn't from old age. You know, this is when I was 20. You know, I had them pull all my teeth out, and I think they gave me 2 aspirins. You know, it was pretty bad. I've seen women die in prison kicking heroin because there was nothing there. You know, so that's prison stories. The prisons out here, they weren't too cool either. You guys got some pretty shitty prisons also. But that was like 52 years ago. Hopefully it changed.